Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel. In this short video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous night of the local time. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And one of the most interesting details are coming from Vovchansk. Let's talk about the northern part. According to information we have, the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to establish complete control over the industrial zone in the southern part of the northern Vovchansk. So that attack was conducted, the Russians been storming this territory for previous few weeks, maybe something like that, and today the pro-Ukrainian mappers Deep State updated their map showing this territory under complete Russian control. When talking about the Russian sources, the group of forces north stated that there are still very heavy clashes, that the Russians continue storming the area, and that there are very heavy clashes exactly for the main office building. So for now, of course, we have adjusted the map. We are showing some gray zone, we are showing some progress according to different mappers, but if it's true, if this information is confirmed, this is going to be significant progress of the armed forces of Russian Federation. And if the Russians did establish complete control over the industrial zone, we can start counting days when the entire north of Vovchansk is going to fall, because from now on the Ukrainians are going to have significant problems to supply their forces in the citadel. On the other hand, the Ukrainian sources reported, and the Russian sources confirmed that piece of news, that the Ukrainians during the previous 24 hours conducted significant number of attempts to attack the Russian forces exactly in the eastern part. The Ukrainians were attacking like something like this, and the Ukrainians were attacking on the line between Tikh and Vovchansk as well. So now the Ukrainians are targeting the main hills in the area, and this is the highest point on this direction. So the main purpose of the Ukrainians is to restore control between eastern Vovchansk and the village by the name of Tikha, to establish, let's say, some number of pontoon bridges, and to restore supply and support of the citadel, at least from the east, because as we understand, the Ukrainians lost these possibilities to support the citadel from the south. The Russians reported that the Ukrainians used significant number of soldiers during those attacks. Let's say in the eastern part, they made few attempts to attack this territory, and they were attacking with the groups of 100 soldiers in each one, but the Russians used total flamethrower systems, and as a result of counter-strikes, the Ukrainians lost up to 40 soldiers. So as you can see, we're coming to the final stage of the battle for the north of Vovchansk, and probably during the next 2, 3, 5 days, the situation will be completely resolved, and we will see the development in someone's favor, in the Ukrainians or the Russians. About the common situation on this direction, according to also Deep State, the Russians continue offensive operation trying to develop their positions from Kupiansk further to the east. The Russians are saying that during the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to improve their positions significantly to the east, and that there are very heavy clashes already in the vicinity of the village by the name of Bachkova. So of course, we're not going to change the map for now, because the report we got was not from very reliable resources, more or less. Also, we have reports from Ukrainian sources that the Russians are building significant number of fortifications in the fields between Kupiansk and Vovchansk, so probably expecting some counterattacks from the Ukrainian side. Now let's move further, and we are going to the northern Kupiansk direction, where the Russians continue offensive operation in direction of Stepovo-Novoselovka. During the previous days, the Russians improved their position significantly in the southeastern part and in the northeastern part. Today we got additional report that the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to establish complete control over these fields as well. For now, we're not adjusting the map because the report we got considered as not so very reliable. We need more details, or at least to wait a little bit to get some geolocated confirmation. And as of Stepovo-Novoselovka, today we got additional video from the Ukrainian sources of how the Russians were trying to attack the Ukrainians along the main tree line in front of the village. That attack, according to this video, at least was repelled by the Ukrainians. The Russians suffered losses and were forced to fall back. Anyway, as we can see, the Russians are in active phase of the final battle for Stepovo-Novoselovka. We also received significant number of videos, geolocated videos, of how the Russians were bombing and attacking the Ukrainian positions around Stepovo-Novoselovka, trying to reduce the Ukrainian possibilities in logistics and supply and support. So once again, regarding the Russian losses, and regarding the fact that maybe not everything goes so smoothly as the Russians wanted, anyway, we see that most likely the days are numbered, and maybe 2, 3, 5 days a week, and Stepovo-Novoselovka will be captured by the Russians. I'll just remind you that Kupiansk currently is main offensive area of the Russian forces. The Ukrainians suffered significant losses, the heaviest losses, let's say, ever on this direction. And let's say, considering losses, this is the second direction of when, let's say, classifying the territories in direction by losses of the armed forces of Ukraine. The first one is the direction of group of forces Yug. It's starting from, let's say, Seversky Donetsk Donbass River till Avdiivka and a little bit further to the south, and Kupiansk is the second area considering the losses. Now let's move to the Siversk direction. According to some Russian sources, the Russians captured the Bilogorovka landfill and the territory completely. For now, this we are not adjusting the map because the reports come not from very reliable resources. Very weird video we got from Bilogorovka itself. The video was published by the Russian sources. On this video, we can see how the Russians were bombing and attacking Bilogorovka itself. I'll remind you that according to the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation, the village was captured a few weeks ago. But let's say some mappers, sources says that this is not 100% sure information. And now we received the video of how the Russians were bombing Bilogorovka. Maybe the video is old, but anyway, the situation is very weird, and we will, let's say, stick close to the situation. Now let's move further to the south in direction of Vovchansk. We have let's say confirmation from deep state that the Russians did capture the territories along the railways. Now we have, let's say, 100% sure information that the Russians are getting closer and closer to Vovchansk. As of Chasov Yar, during the previous night, we haven't received anything important, just few geolocations of how the Ukrainians lost another tank or another Russian strike. Now let's move to Avdiivka area. We have significant number of details during the previous night. The Russians continue offensive operation, let's say, in the vicinity of Novoalexandrovka, and during the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to improve their positions along this tree line. The Russians captured this stronghold, the Russians captured these intersections of the tree lines, and the situation for the Ukrainians in Sokol, Evgeniivka, Progress, and Luzovatska is getting worse and worse. Very difficult to understand where exactly the Russians are planning to move further, but maybe the Russians are planning to move to Luzovatska, trying to, let's say, cut the supply road between Progress and Vovchansk itself. So it's not very important area, not very important road, but it plays some, let's say, role in common Ukrainian, let's say, logistics. So maybe the Russians are trying to get here. If they can do this, of course, it can deal significant losses to Ukrainian logistics. We haven't received anything, almost anything from Novosilovka Persha, just few FPV drone strikes on Ukrainian, let's say, Max Pros armored vehicles that were abandoning their positions from the line of combat contact towards Novosilovka Persha. So just another episode of how the Ukrainians try to save their vehicles, trying to get let's say, to save as many as possible, let's say, assets from this direction. Very interesting details are coming from the line between Karlovka and Yasnobrodovka. As you can see, according to Deep State, the Russians established complete control over the Karlovka water reservoir, let's say, in its most eastern part. So this territory was captured by the Russians during the previous, let's say, few days, maybe a week or something like this. And as you can see, the Russians are getting closer and closer to this residential area, and maybe very likely that there are very heavy clashes already right now. Anyway, the most important thing is that the Russians managed to reach the main, let's say, Ukrainian logistic area. I'm talking about this intersection of the tree lines. During the previous days, the Russians dealt significant damage to the Ukrainian forces, armored vehicles, personnel carriers that were moving, let's say, through these intersections of roads. This area the Ukrainians are using for supplying and supporting their forces in Yasnobrodovka, and now we see complete fire control over this territory. So once again, the Ukrainians still have their positions, as you can see, in Yasnobrodovka, and using these tree lines and, let's say, this road, the Ukrainians try to support their forces in this small stronghold, but now we see complete control by the Russians. If we increase the numbers of this since the beginning of June, we're going to see a significant number of geolocations in the same area, which confirms that Ukrainians are losing their positions here, and most likely during the next 5 days this territory will be captured by the Russians completely, just because of complete absence of any supply and support of forces in Yasnobrodovka. So this is the situation in this area. Very likely the story will be finished very soon. Also, we have additional confirmation from Deep State about the Russian complete control over the village by the name of Nivoyska. So the battle also is ongoing, and very likely soon the situation will be resolved as well in Russian favor. So these are the most important updates from the ground. We have additional few geolocations of Russian FAB strikes somewhere in the deep rear or close rear. In this video we can see another FAB arrived in some village to the north of Gulay Pole. So nothing special. Very interesting details are coming when talking about political things. According to information we have, the United States of America, it's official, the United States and Ukraine will sign a bilateral security agreement on the sidelines of the G7 summit in Italy, which will take place in June 13-15. So it's the starting of today. And according to information we have today, on the 30th, this is going to be happen. So this is, as I understand, going to be the final security agreement, more or less reliable, more or less powerful, strong security agreement that Ukraine is going to sign. Probably the United States of America will announce an additional military package, and this is going to be additional media victory for Ukraine, despite the big problems on the line of combat contact with Russia and significant loss of the territories during the previous few months and few days as a result of Russian offensive operation. Also, we have some details about the results of Russian missile strike that took yesterday. If you remember, according to the Ukrainians, they managed to bring down every single missile that the Russians launched in Ukraine. But today we continue receiving updates of how the Ukrainians were trying to normalize the situation. They've spent significant number, almost the entire day, the Ukrainians were trying to resolve the problems and the losses that were caused by the Russians as a result of attack. You see the very big fire, and according to information we have, the Russians destroyed some fuel depot in Ukraine, in the vicinity of Kiev. We have report from Dutch. Ukraine will receive the first batch of updated F-16 fighters this summer, so we're gonna see additional escalation of the conflict, and the summer is going to be obviously very hot. But when summer ends, the Ukrainians understand that they should expect a very, very cold and very, very deep, dark winter. And according to some reports, projections, very likely they are going to be Ukrainians who will suffer the situation when they will be completely without electricity for 20 hours a day. So a very big problem. So as I understand, the Western countries and Ukrainians as well probably think that by winter the situation will be resolved and Ukrainians will be able to restore the electricity and to finish the special military operation. But I highly doubt this. Also, we have report from the United States of America, more precisely from Cuba. The Russians continue escalation from their side. They continue their military exercises with a nuclear weapon and their nuclear carriers in Havana. And this is not very interesting, not very, let's say, pleasant situation for the United States of America. So this is another Cuban missile crisis. We'll see how this situation is going to be finished. And that's it for the short video. Military summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.